Dr. Jackie's here, changing life loving you. Yeah, that's the groove, life loving you. Feel the truth, move, life loving you. It's all we do, come on through, it's just for you.
I look at money in my life as an accelerator. Really, money is a thing that gives you options. So either makes who you are bigger, it amplifies it. That's with your flaws as well as your your great characteristics. But more importantly, money is something that allows you to have options. So what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to maximize your potential or to develop your potential. Because listen, we all have a lot of potential, but we know that 80% of the people that have potential never live to actualize all of it. Money gives you options though. So because you have money, now I'm able to go to this university. Because I have money, I have this dream or this vision, I'm able to deploy my vision because I have resources to do it. When you don't have those resources, you have fewer options. And I think that that's what makes for very unhappy people. And you kind of feel stuck. You're relegated to doing things that you might not want to do, living a life that you didn't see yourself living. So money is really important. I think that the way we treat money is really strategic. So if you look at who am I wanting to show up as in life? Where do I see myself going? Who do I see myself being? Then you use money as your vehicle to help you to get there. But money to me culturally has become different things to different people. Like some people use money for status. So they're going to use it to buy certain things or to live a lifestyle that they really can't own because we have this thing called credit cards. I'm going to say it again, credit cards. Credit cards are not your friend. They're only your friend when you don't need them, But money, I think, is a powerful tool to daily living. And when I was young, I didn't know that we were really poor. I found out later that we were living in the projects when I was first born. So my parents were migrant workers. And I just saw people that worked hard, but I had basically everything. I had everything that I wanted, I think nowadays is very different though, because for me to think that I was wealthy back then, it was very possible because we didn't have design or anything. You didn't have Jordan sneakers. You didn't have Tory Burch, or I don't even know if I should even mention these names, but we just didn't have all of that. So nobody knew what you were wearing unless they saw you take your dress off and they saw the tag. This generation is very different because kids know all of the name brands and they want that. Now it becomes a dividing line. It distinguishes the haves from the have-nots. And it's really unfortunate. So I was poor and didn't know it, but just as happy as a lark. For me, the thing that was most important to let you know how much your parents had was Christmas time. Man, Christmas time. If you didn't have a shiny new bike or some roller skates or some games to play, it was like, turning the lights on and all of the creatures just start scurrying. That's how it was on Christmas Day. You would know that everybody's getting up at the crack of dawn, opening their gifts, and then maybe grabbing something to eat. And then maybe around like 10 a.m., the sidewalks were filled with kids playing with their new toys. That was an indicator because there were some families that I remember when I was a young child whose kids didn't have toys. And, my parents would tell us to share. And so we would share what we had with them. That was the only thing that made me ever know that there was any difference between who had money and who didn't. One of the things my parents taught me about money was that you work hard for it. The other thing that they taught me was take care of what you have. And, I live in a house now that I built. We built this house almost 25 years ago or longer. And I have some of the same furniture. My mom taught me how to buy quality and how to take care of what you have. So you buy the best. You save your money and you buy good quality. And then you take care of it so that it lasts. I was talking to someone who was buying furniture from one of these companies. She said by the time she finished paying for the furniture on credit, the furniture had broken down and she had to go buy more. I have never had to buy furniture because it wore out I've only bought furniture because maybe I wanted to change a few pieces, to change the look. So those were two important things that my parents taught me that I definitely have followed, and I can see how they benefited me throughout the course of my life. My mom used to always tell me, she says, Jackie, you see the way that your father and I have raised you. You see what we've done for you. And I would say, yes, Mom. She says, you need to get a man that can keep you in the same style that you become accustomed to. And I know when I was young, I told you my parents were migrant workers. I lived in projects. Then we moved to this black neighborhood, this little small black neighborhood in a white neighborhood. So it was like this little, small 4-block area surrounded by a white neighborhood. Neighborhoods on all sides were all basically all white. And my dad was doing better. So we had this nice house. And then I remember he had taught himself how to be a laborer. Back in the days, they would have men standing on the corner and a truck would come by in the morning. Hey, you. And you would just jump on the back of the truck and they would take you wherever and you would work all day. And they would pay you and that would be it. So my dad was just such a great worker because he really worked hard. They would always pick him up. So he learned how to be a laborer in construction. After he learned how to be a laborer, while he would be doing his job, instead of taking his lunch break, he would go over and start teaching himself how to be a mason. So my father learned how to be a mason. That increased his pay grade. And I remember over time, he started his own company. And there was this white guy back in the day, remember, this is during the time where there really were not great race relations. He said, Joe, you're a good nigger. He says, I like you. He says, I'm gonna take you down to the Gables, Coral Gables, and I'm gonna help you get you licensed into the union. And he went with my dad, like every quarter, they would go to Coral Gables. And he would just fight with those people saying they should let my dad in. He was actually the first black ever contractor ever admitted into the union in Coral Gables. And then our life drastically changed because literally the amount of money that he was making on a regular job was multiplied tenfold. So we became very affluent. And so I was able to travel, in high school, to do a lot of things. As a matter of fact, my first car, my parents gave me a Mercedes for graduating, top of my class. We were just affluent, but very ordinary in terms of what my parents expected from you, the fact that you understood that it was going to be work and that you were going to earn whatever you received. Among women of color, basically 70% of them will out-earn their husbands. And I was like, whoa, And I thought about all of the ramifications. To me, that is a sad statistic because it means that there has to be something institutionalized that is creating that sort of a disparity. And I also thought about what is that going to do to the men? It means that we have to redefine the way that we look at marriage. The man cannot be seen as the provider. I know for me, I'm not really interested in a provider. I'm interested in a partner. I'm interested in my equal opposite. I married my husband, I said I do because he was someone that didn't complete me. He was the other part of me. Number two, he was someone that I could do life with. He was my partner. And we set goals and things that we wanted to see ourselves accomplish. It really doesn't matter to me. When we first married, he definitely made more money than I did. Over the years, it's gone back and forth. My husband owned a company when we were first dating, so I didn't have my own company at the time. Well, actually, I did. That's not true. I did have my own company, but I was leaving it full-time to now operate it part-time and go into education. But I don't want to be defined, and I don't want my husband defined based on what someone brings into the relationship. Because to me, whatever I bring and whatever he brings is ours. So it really doesn't matter who lays the golden egg and who watches the golden egg. It's one and the same. The most important thing is you got the golden egg. It's like, let's keep the main thing the main thing. Debt. That's a dirty word. Debt, to me, when I think about it, I get this feeling of just being oppressed. Because what debt does is it swallows you up. It swallows up, again, your options and your opportunities. So debt is not a good thing for me at all. When I first got married, I had maybe like $10,000 or $15,000 debt from my student loans. And I remember the first thing my husband said was, "Look, girl, you're using a credit card to put gas in? That's asinine." And he would give me like my allowance, every week or every month for gas. Because he was like, "We are not going to put gas on a card. You're paying 18 to 21% interest on it." I don't think debt is a good thing, but I think what's more important than debt, we have to look at what is the cause of debt. And I think it's that people live outside of their means. You have to learn to delay gratification. And I felt so accomplished when I learned to do that, because it really takes discipline. You're in the mall, you see this bad outfit, and I like shoes too. And some of them shoes were on and popping, and I had to have them. But to be able to say no and to decide that you're going to wait until you can really afford it. And then I think too, the struggle is going to be harder for the younger generations because they're so into brands, and these brands are not inexpensive. They're not inexpensive. So there's people that are really not paying Peter so that they can buy some Tory Burch or whichever designer, fits their fancy. So debt to me is not anything that I've ever readily joined into. I've not ever had a lot of debt, and I don't think that I ever will. Well, I'm really lucky because in my marriage, both my husband and I are very compatible financially. We both love to save. We both are pretty frugal. As a matter of fact, when I started working in television, I remember I was doing my first photo shoot, and the stylist says, "Who are your favorite brands?" And I was like, "Brands?" And, I just mentioned like some little things off the rack, that you can get from Sears, JCPenney's, or whatever, Macy's, And she was like, "Oh, okay. I'm not asking what you wear to work. I mean, when you go out, like, what are your brands?" And I started to laugh because now I understand what she was saying. But back then, listen, $99 was all I was spending on a suit, and I had to be suited up every day for work. I would not put money into clothing. Now, the industry that I'm working in, I understand that it's different. You have to change your uniform. I have to wear the uniform for entertainment. And it's brand heavy. So, I've learned to change it, but I still have a set budget on what I will spend on wardrobe. And I also like to resell because, it helps me to feel like I'm, recycling. I'm buying, and as I retire it, I'm getting some of my money back anyways. I think that the preparation for people getting married financially is really a joint deal, right? So it's really about what are your financial goals going to be as a couple? Now, there's so many different ways that people want to do it. Some people want to separate their finances and not share or have a common savings and checking account. That's why I think since there's so much variety around how to attack it, that it should be an individual thing that people do once they're deciding to get married, to get together. They need to make those decisions. I think people have asked about prenups. I remember when I first got married, I was like, why would you plan to fail? If you can't trust a person, then you shouldn't even get married. Forget a prenup. Now I realize, that was really a sophomoric approach. Really, here's the rule for a prenup. When there's a very unequal assets between partner A and partner B, you need a prenup. And all it does is it protects partner A's assets. So if I earn 3 to 4 times more than you do, we're going to get a prenup. Because I need to know that if there's a dissolution of marriage, that I'm going to walk away with most of my assets and you're going to walk away with most of yours. I think when people have a problem with that, a lot of times it's because they're not just loving you just for you. Tina was not wrong when she said, "What's love got to do with it?" So there's always discussion when I or my husband want to go after something that's a big ticketed item. We just have rules around how we spend our money. We really do feel that there needs to be an agreement. So it's not like I can just come home one day and I'm bringing home, a new car and we haven't had a conversation about it. Or, he's bringing home a flat screen TV or a new stereo system and we don't, I know nothing about it. So we definitely talk about it. There's a point where you get to where there's such fluidity with your finances where you might not have to save. It might just be money that's still sitting in your budget that you can expense, for that particular item. But there's big ticket items, like say it's a house or whatever, and we definitely talk about that. We talk about, for me, our rule is, when I say for me, I mean, we both agree with this. You never touch savings. So if it's, say you want a new house or you want a new car, then that has to be an item that you're able to save up the additional money to acquire, or you are able to just buy it, but you don't touch savings. And I think that that's a really good rule, because if you make an exception one time, you're going to always make an exception, because there's always something wonderful that you just feel like you need to have. So my husband and I talked about everything before we got married. So we already had this playbook. And one of the areas that we definitely talked about was family and finances. Because, you got that old uncle, hey there, how you doing? Why don't you get your uncle 20, Or you have that brother that wants to borrow money, or that wants to come and live with you for a while. So we talked about all of those things. And this was our rule to guide us. We said that if someone wanted to borrow money, we would first come together and talk about it and come to an agreement on what the amount would be, if it would be a gift or a loan, because some people, they're not going to pay you back. So we just decided some people, you just give them the money. So you decide on what the amount is. And if it is to be repaid, what the terms were for repayment. And that has worked really, really well. When I grew up, my parents gave each of us our first home. So they helped us with our first home. They didn't buy the whole thing and just give it to us. But like, say, for example, they would give you about $20,000 to $30,000 towards your first home. And that was just something that they did with all of their children. Some of them, and I'm not going to lie, some of my siblings got 2 houses. They got my parents helping them with more than one. Similarly, your first car. Those were things that I wanted to replicate with my own children. So like when they came of age at 15, I bought each of them their own car. When they were buying their homes, I didn't help with their homes. I did something different. What I did is I went in and I furnished their homes, because I love to decorate. So I would go through and just buy, because I wanted to also make sure that they bought good quality furniture that was going to last them like mine did. So I would furnish their home from, ceiling to floor, every room. And that's what, I did. And I emulated what my parents established. But another thing that I do financially for my kids is I wanted to start a new tradition. And so my tradition is every year or so, we go on a worldwide vacation. So we've gone to Asia, Japan, Singapore, all over the place. We've gone to South Africa. We've gone to Europe, Central Europe, like Berlin, Amsterdam, and places like that. And so my goal would be that this is something that I would begin as a tradition, that we would go as a family, all expenses paid. So my husband and I pay for everything. And then I want to continue this, that when they get married and they have children, we still are able to take everybody with us. So, that definitely is going to take planning, because that means, again, you're not touching savings, that you're accruing money that you can pay for these wonderful vacations. And it's just such a fun thing. We plan it, everybody gets a city and they plan what kind of excursions we're going to do in that city. I love it. And I just pray to God that I'll be able to, take that on into the future and to incorporate now their wives and then my little grandbabies when I'm able to start having them. Hey, Dr. Jacquie here. I'm your how-to lady. How to do life, how to do love, and how to do you, boo. So click, like, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more to come.